morning. Everybody ready? All right, let's open up in prayer this morning. Is there a volunteer to pray? Justin?
Yes, I'll be a prayer on today, if that's okay.
Sure.
Dear Heavenly Lord, thank you for, thank you for having us gathered here today, as usual, it's Sunday. Just to hear what you have to say, hear what the pastor has to say, as we know you're speaking through his heart and the teacher's heart. And please help us to, help us and guide us to understand what it is that you want us to learn from these teachings, and allowing us to make the choice with your wonderful voice inside our heads to say, okay, when you tell us not to do something or to do something, and to listen to that and not ignore it. And also, please help those who are sick to make a very full recovery so they can get back here and, listen to what you have to say and hear what you have to say. And in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. So last weekend, we've been talking about the kingdoms in Nebuchadnezzar's dream that are represented by a statue and how they correlate with each other. So we looked at basically three primary correlations, which are they are major powers within the region of Israel. They have a relationship with Israel, whether in a negative aspect or a positive aspect. And what was the third? They had major moral, social, and religious influence over the region. So those are the three primary characteristics of the kingdoms that are represented in in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So we looked at last weekend from a standpoint of what this kingdom that's represented by the iron legs and the iron and clay feet, and what this kingdom's relationship would be with Israel. And so we covered some scriptures in Isaiah, Zechariah, Ezekiel that talk about this nation that will come up against Israel and invade Jerusalem, and in a pretty brutal way. So Isaiah talks about how both Isaiah, Zechariah, and Ezekiel talk about there's going to be many that are slaughtered, women raped. So kind of a pretty stark imagery of what's coming for Israel. And then we started looking at, this nation that's coming, that will come up against Jerusalem, how is this associated with the iron? How can we draw a conclusion that this nation is represented by the iron legs and the feet in Daniel's statue? So we looked at Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 to draw those correlations, and we'll finish off this part of it in, let's start in Revelation verse 12.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So all of that kind of graphic, these are the things to come kind of language, is that literal or is that more of a representation of like complete loss of dignity, that's like the most degrading thing you can do to a man, right, is to dishonor his wife, like, if that were to happen to a nation as a whole, is that literally what's going to happen, or is it more like you are brought so low, you are dishonored, you are made in, fill in the blank there?
It's possible. It's possible it could be both. I would tend towards that it's a literal event, because in both Ezekiel and Isaiah, this is what kind of sparks the return of the Messiah, and Israel is then established, it says, in peace without borders. So I think it's probably possible that it's referring to both. But I think it is literal too, because it's in a in a sense it's a judgment on Israel as well, because Israel, as we'll see in Ezekiel 11, Israel in the past was judged because of their iniquities, and I think history is going to repeat itself.
Are we in the Bible?
So we're going to be in Revelations 12. We'll start in verse 7. Revelation 12, verse 7 says, "Next there was a battle in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but it was not strong enough to win, so that there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent, also known as the devil and Satan, the adversary, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled down to earth, and his angels were hurled down with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now have come God's victory, power, and kingship, and the authority of his Messiah, because the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them day and night before God, has been thrown out. They defeated him because of the Lamb's blood and because of the message of their witness. Even when facing death, they did not cling to life. Therefore rejoice, heaven, and you who live there. But woe to you, land and sea, for the adversary has come down to you, and he is very angry, because he knows that his time is short-lived. So when the dragon saw that he had been hurled down to the earth, he went in pursuit of the woman." So who's the woman? Huh? Not in this depiction. Wrong woman. Israel.
Oh, yeah. Who's having the baby?
Yeah, so he went in pursuit of the woman who had given birth to the male child, but the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she could fly to her place in the desert, where she is taken care of for a season and 2 seasons and a half a season, away from the serpent's presence. So the serpent spewed water like a river out of its mouth after the woman, in order to sweep her away in the flood. But the land came to her rescue. It opened its mouth and swallowed up the river, which the dragon had spewed out of its mouth. The dragon was infuriated over the woman and went off to fight the rest of her children, those who obey God's commands and bear witness to Yeshua. So we'll save the imagery for later as later in my lessons, but just indicating that this dragon, which we'll see is correlated with Babylon, is pursuing the woman or Israel. So there's this Babylon is focused or is motivated to destroy and corrupt the woman Israel. Let's go to Revelations 14, verse 14 through 20. It says, "Then I looked, and there before me was a white cloud. Sitting on the cloud was someone like the Son of Man, with a gold crown and on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel came out of the temple and shouted to the one sitting on the cloud, 'Start using your sickle to reap, because the time to reap has come. The earth's harvest is ripe.' The one sitting on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And then out from the altar went yet another angel who was in charge of the fire. And he called out in a loud voice to the one with the sharp sickle, 'Use your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because they are ripe.' And the angel swung his sickle down onto the earth, gathered the earth's grapes, and threw them into the great winepress of God's fury. The winepress is trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as the horses' bridles for 200 miles." Let's see why. So yeah, the question is, why is the earth ripe for the harvest? And it's an imagery here indicating that all the nations have gathered before Israel, and they've come to overtake Israel. So verse 20, says it indicates this by there's these the level of judgment is up to as high as the horse's bridle. And then Revelation 16 kind of illustrates this even further. If we go to Revelation 16, verse 13 through 16, it says, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits that looked like frogs. They came from the mouth of the dragon, from the mouth of the beast, and from the mouth of the false prophet. They are miracle-working demonic spirits which go out to the kings of the whole inhabited world to assemble them for the war of the great day of Adonai. Look, I am coming like a thief. How blessed are those who stay alert and keep their clothes clean, so that they won't be walking naked and be publicly put to shame." And they gathered the kings to the place which in Hebrew is called Har Megiddo. So we'll get into like where that Har Megiddo is. Let's see. So yeah, so just again, just imagery picking or depicting that there's a nation that has gathered supporting nations together to wage war against Israel. Okay. Let's see. So there's indication that this nation will have a relationship with Israel, and that relationship will essentially be a war against Israel. Similar to that of Babylon. How about so we talked about the characteristics of the kingdoms and the statue, and one of those characteristics were its moral, social, and religious influence over the region. So what about this nation to come, this Babylon, and what kind of influence will it have over that region? So to start this, I want to go back to Genesis. So we'll look at this from a moral standpoint. So in the garden was this tree of, what's that? We're going to be in chapter 3. Yeah. So in the garden was this tree of knowledge. What was the knowledge of what? Good and evil. So essentially morality, right? Morality or moral, being moral is the ability to decipher what is good and evil. So the tree is really a symbol of morality, the ability to distinguish between good and evil. So Adam is given a choice whether to live by the morals established by God or of his own. And why do I say that? So God issued a commandment to Adam to not partake of the fruit of the tree. Right? So in that commandment, he gave Adam a choice. You can either follow my moral standards or you can follow your own by making a choice to disobey me. So who knows whether the fruit of the tree had some magical ability to give Adam this, ability to, as the serpent says, be like God, to be able to distinguish good and evil. So, does the fruit have this ability, or is it that the command itself brought into existence a self-proclaimed morality? And I'll get into what I mean by self-proclaimed morality. So I guess another way to think about it is, in issuing that command, if Adam chose to partake of the fruit, he would establish his own base of morality, because he chose to decide what was good and what was bad. Does that make sense?
But was there bad before he ate from the tree? Or was everything just good? I think you're saying, was it the fruit itself, or was it the choice?
Yeah. Is it the fact that there's a choice now to take it that would make him realize what is good and evil? Or was it, within the fruit?
Does it matter?
Well,
Chose better.
no, it doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't.
I think,
My bad.
well, I guess it kind of does, because, it gets back to the choice.
Yeah.
So, one thing, so Eve had already began establishing her own sense of morality. Why do I say that? So when the serpent approached her and asked, let's see, what did he say? Or it say? It said, the serpent said to Eve, did God really say you are not to eat from any tree in the garden? So what was Eve's response? She said, you are neither to eat from it nor touch it. So she added to, right. She thought it would, it would be good to, look, if we can't even eat at the tree, why wouldn't it be, let's one up that and put,
You can look at it, but you can't touch it.
right. So let's put a hedge around that and, protect us so that we don't even, can't even get to that point. So she added to God's command.
What if Adam did?
He might have, and she may have just been, yeah, reverberating what he said. So either Eve or Adam saw that it was good to place an additional condition, which is essentially what Israel did with Moses' law, right? They created how many hundreds of sub-laws that would prevent them from encroaching on the law of Moses?
Well, it started off as 10, now it's at like 1,000 by this point. By the time of Jesus, I think. Or maybe it's a lot lower, but. I feel like a lot of misunderstanding.
So, I stated previously that it was possible that by simply commanding Adam and Eve not to eat of the tree, that it brought about a self-proclaimed morality. So when Eve glanced at the fruit of the tree, she made a moral judgment based on what she determined. What were the three things she determined? And I think these are at the root. Well, I'll get into that. So are you following me so far?
I am, but I don't know where you're going with it.
Okay.
And just my natural.
So they decided to,
Say, I don't like it.
they built their own moral standards, right? Instead of going off of God.
Can you define moral?
The ability to decide what is good and evil.
Good and evil.
At a personal level?
Yes.
What is good for me and what is not.
What is good for me and what is bad for me. And essentially that is at the root of the fall. Mankind moved away from relying on God to define what is good and evil and relied on their own.
We were also discussing yesterday, like, okay, after the fall, the first thing God says to them is, where are you?
Well, I'll get to that. Don't skip forward. So what are the three things that Eve determines? She looks at the fruit and she said it is good. So it's a moral measurement, right? That the fruit is good. Why is it good? Because it's food. What else? It's pleasing. So you're dealing with a decision between what is good and evil. You're dealing with desire, what is desirable or pleasant to the senses. And then what's the third thing she said? She wanted to be wise. So those are the three things that I think are at the root of the flesh. We've set up our own moral, our own moral, what would you say, standards. We've sought after what is pleasing to our flesh, and oftentimes what we deem to be good and evil or good and bad is driven by what we find to be pleasing and desirable, and we seek after knowledge. If you think, if I think about before I joined the church, what drove me on a daily basis? I had a hierarchy of morals that I'd follow. Some outweighed the, there were things that, I were kind of higher on the scale in terms of what I thought was good and what I thought was bad.
There's also, there's been a lot of research on babies, right? Because babies, kind of the debate on are more there's
Right.
some fluidity there. But even like when things that are pleasing to the eye, they've done some studies where they'll show infants pictures of conventionally attractive human beings, and then maybe and some photos of maybe others or other primates that are not humans, and the eyes of the infants will linger on the more conventionally attractive humans and less so on things that they do not find pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
So even babies have preferences without even being told
Right.
what the preferences are.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I look at my motivations before, I got serious about following God, and even now, when I put my motivations before God, those are the three things that drive my motivations. You make decisions based on what whether your morals are developed through, through your family and what they've passed on to you, or through your experiences in your environment, and driven by what I desired, whether it was career-oriented, money, and then knowledge. I as an engineer, engineers, the pride of intellect is very dangerous. And what I mean by that, just when the tendency to look down on people because you're smarter than them is
That is very.
yeah, it's pretty prevalent within at least my profession, and it's very hard to eradicate that. It takes a lot of humbling to kind of push that out of your mind, because it's always in your, it's like once you recognize that, you're I don't know how to explain it. It's like when you try to correct for that, you're like, I'll pass on that for now. I can't. I got to formulate my. But I think the point is, those things. If I look at my life, those apart when I was living for myself, those are like the three primary motivators for the decisions I made. So what was the result of eating the fruit? So they made the decision. So Eve made the decision because she thought it was good, because it was desirable, and because she sought knowledge. So yeah. So they, after they ate the fruit, the first thing they realized is that they were naked. So they based what's that? Yeah, who told you were naked? Right. So now that they've established their own moral compass in their own mind, being naked was considered bad. Because before they fell, was being naked evil? No, I mean they didn't know. They were in the presence of God, doing God's work.
Inappropriate thoughts.
They probably knew they were naked, it just wasn't problematic.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
The ones in the garden and they were married to God.
well, again, I'm going back to babies. Babies don't care if they're naked.
Right.
They have no, they're, in that sense, it's just their natural state of existence, and it is good. And then there comes a time when that switches.
Right.
Natural became unnatural.
Yeah, it does. And it's sometimes, for some kids, it's later. And your daughter's 8, and you're like, you need to put more on there.
Yeah. And why is that? Because we, as their parents, have established that as bad and not good.
Yeah, because it's a danger to you.
Right.
Like, that
Right.
Like, you're not gonna, like, maybe a sunburn is the worst thing that's gonna come out of it, but there's weirdos out there that need to protect you by.
Right. So yeah, I think they realize they're naked because they decided to go off their own moral standards, and now they have determined or deemed that it was bad to be naked. So these three basic motivations, moral judgments, pursuing what is pleasing or desirable, and increasing knowledge would be inherited by all mankind and would be demonstrated by leaders, and actually exemplified or magnified by leaders throughout history. So Saul is one example. So if you remember when we were in 1 Samuel, I think it's chapter 15, when the Lord commanded Saul to lead Israel against Amalek, what did the Lord commanded him to completely destroy them, right? Completely destroy the men, the women, the animals, and even the babies, children and babies. But what did Saul do?
Well, he kept the king alive, and then he also kept all the choicest animals.
Right.
To sacrifice.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
So he went off his own moral standard, right? He determined what was good, and some of that was driven by what was desirable, right? He saw these clean animals, and
He wanted to please God.
right. So in his mind, he was doing good. He was working off of his own morals. We read about Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel 4, he elevated himself to great heights through his motivations and his motivation to seek power and knowledge. But what's the danger in doing that? Who do you typically accredit it to? Yourself, yeah. So he gave himself all the credit, and what was the result? All that knowledge, and God made him like an animal, right? Remove all of his knowledge and make him eat like an animal. So this is a common tendency when we rely on our own ability to establish morality and to seek after what is pleasing. Once we have enacted what we deem good, and once we've acquired what is pleasing in knowledge, we've accredited to our or knowledge we've gained, we accredit it to our ability to do the good or to accomplish what we sought out after. So we accredit that all to ourselves. So this, in essence, is the added. So we talked about what this Babylon in Revelation is. So this essence is the attitude of Babylon that we'll be reading about in Revelation 17 and 18. So this attitude to, build off our own morals, to seek wholeheartedly what we please and desire, and also to seek after knowledge, is really the essence of Babylon. I say attitude and spirit of Babylon. Revelation 17, 1-4 says, I shall show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many water, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. So even just the word there indicates that, what this Babylon or harlot has established as being moral is in complete opposition to what God considers to be good, right? Hence the word immorality. And then the fact that this harlot sits by many water, the water indicates what? What does that represent?
The peoples of the world.
Peoples of the world. So has a significant influence over the people of the world. It says that kings of the earth will commit the same acts, so they will be influenced. And then it says he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet. I would suggest that indicates a what color do priests typically wear, right? So purple. So well, there's a indicates both royalty and priesthood, or an office of royalty and what's an office of priest? The scarlet beast, let's see. Full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations and of the unclean things of her morality. Yeah, I think that's part of it, and we'll get into that.
So are we defining immorality as decisions for our best interest that are not God's decisions for our best interest? So adding to, or so what Eve did by adding the parameter of don't even touch it was an immoral act because it was outside of the guidance that God had established.
Possibly. I mean, Scripture says do not add or take away from the Word of God, and she added to His commandments. But
So individuals that create additional layers of rules, even if done in the interest of protecting what God has commanded, would be immoral. Say,
Well,
congregations that require women to wear dresses
or
to church,
not drinking alcohol.
or yes, is that immorality as well? Even if it's
taking it a step
I don't-
further to prevent.
I think that in the attitude that they made those laws is what made it immoral, right? Because they became so legalistic that that's why they did that. They missed the point of the law.
so in an effort, well, we see that, I mean, that's something we encounter a lot more frequently in kind of our modern society, right? We know of many sister churches that say alcohol is an absolute no-go because not in maybe an effort to like control, but also to err on the side of extreme caution, or they feel, even if it was done with great intentions, it's still not explicitly outlawed in Scripture.
Right.
So in terms of coming, and I know I'm kind of digging into weeds that we probably don't need to be in, but it's been a hurdle for me to kind of approach those conversations from a place of patience and understanding when I have such a hard time understanding the why. Because people will cling to that very, very strongly and create their own, it really forms their worldview and the lens with which they interact with you if they feel that you are outside of scriptural bounds, right?
Right.
Because I'll have a glass of wine at dinner. And so, I don't really know what I'm asking here, but it makes it really complex when you're talking about establishing moral standards that do not come directly from God.
Right. Yeah, and we even know there's freedom that Christ has given us, and I say that because when I forget where it's at. There were members of the church that were still celebrating the Feast of the Moon, something like that, and God God didn't say no, you can't do that. He said to the people associated with that individual, respect what he's, respect the fact that that's a tradition of his. So I think when people, I guess in your instance, when people put those dogmas in place, I think that's opposing the nature of what God wants in his church.
Well, even Jesus came up against this issue when he was dealing with the leaders of Israel, and the fact that, he brought to their attention that it's like, John abstained from strong drink, and you look at the way that he lived, and you judged him, and then I do the opposite because he was eating and drinking with sinners and that, and they were doing the same thing. They were judging him as well. So it's like, oh yeah. Well, like, when his disciples were eating something on Sunday or Saturday. They're picking grain on the Sabbath. Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Or like the Good Samaritan, where the priest, to keep himself clean, he kept away from the person that was eating on the road.
Yeah.
You get so kind of in your own mind, like, oh, I have responsibilities, and I have to get to the festival, and I have to, I'm in a place of position that I'm supposed to do all these things, and I'm serving God by keeping myself clean, but meanwhile, this guy's eating on the road. It wasn't until the Good Samaritan came by and actually did what God wants us to do. Help other people.
Yeah.
Because the television is responsibility.
Yeah. Justin, did you have something?
I don't know if this is in the right context, but we don't have people doing things that are not. I don't know if this is the right context, but if people are doing something that is not okay, and it goes against your moral standards, you don't have to join in. You don't have to go drinking if they're drinking. You don't have to worship whatever they're worshiping. You could tell them, hey, that's not a good idea, but you don't have to join in.
Yeah.
If this is not in the right context of what you're preaching about, my apologies.
No, it's good. So yeah, you asked, what is immorality, and it's really, in reference to this Babylon, this nation has established its own morals that are so departed from God's morals, and it's the attitude behind that. Because really, at the root of it, it's the attitude, right? Like when Eve decided to disobey God and be and to take the advice of the adversary, it was an indication of her attitude.
Do you see any significance in the fact that it was only after it says that Adam partook of that fruit that their eyes were opened?
Yeah, I do.
So I mean, it. So what? So I mean, one would. It would beg the question of like, what would have happened if Adam was not partaking of that fruit? but I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
he
it'd be
did, so
just
therefore
speculating.
now
Right.
we are in this place where
Probably would have scrapped the prototype,
we're
gotten
all
a fresh one.
we're all out of we're all in the common place. So,
And that's a indication of what Adam desired, right? I mean, what did he desire more, to please his helpmate or to please God?
Partner yourself wisely.
Yeah.
in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, it says in verse 23, everything is lawful, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is lawful, but not everything builds up. No one should seek his own advantage, but that of his neighbor. And then it goes on about food and
If you could, doesn't mean you should.
right. So I think Paul, at the very first verse of chapter 11, Paul says, "Be imitators of me as I am of Christ." So I mean, I think the focus is that we need to be imitators of Christ.
Right.
Um,
And that goes back to when God calls us to essentially metamorphosize our mind, it's rearranging our thought process and our attitude, and make our moral decisions should be based on, I mean, you can't, I mean, we could make, we have the ability to make good and bad decisions apart from God.
we have the power within us to rationalize,
Right.
to make anything that we want good
Yeah.
or bad.
And
You
that's,
can take that as far as you want.
Right.
It can go any place. But I mean, so simply saying, something like, if I decide in my life that eating meat is bad, and I'm going to stop eating meat, and that I'm just going to go vegetarian.
right.
It's a personal choice that I make. But is it of my benefit? Is it to any benefit if I all of a sudden start, making a huge deal of it, like you can't eat meat because meat is bad?
Yeah.
But there's nothing that says in the Word of God that meat's bad.
Right. So yeah, when you it's only through the Messiah that we can do good, right? The right good. It's only through the Messiah that we can only desire the right things, the pleasing things to God, right? And it's only through the Messiah that we can gain the right wisdom and knowledge, the correct wisdom and how to apply it properly to our lives. And and it's obvious in Genesis, when you depart from that, you open yourself up to being influenced by this adversarial spirit, which in Ephesians 2:2 it says the spirit of the world, or the prince of the air, right? So and that's absolutely what happened to Eve, right? She was influenced by, yep. So, all right, I'm 10 minutes over. Thanks. That's all I had. And well, before that, part of the reason why I bring this up is because, even though we're going to be focusing on one kingdom, that's represented by Babylon, this attitude or spirit of Babylon is shared by many nations. If you read Herodotus and his historical writings, there are nations even outside of Persia, Babylon, Assyria that were just as corrupt, implemented the same, I mean, where their moral compass had drifted so far off, you know, but in their mind they thought they were doing the right thing. So even though that we're going to be focusing on one nation, just remember that, and as we'll see in Ezekiel 11, that, you know, we're at risk of falling influence to that as well. And you know, as we read in Revelation, there's many nations that will fall under that influence and follow that same spirit and attitude.